Long time no see, gang. How's everybody doing? Got a thumbs up from Wendy. An iffy nod from Betsy. I hope that doesn't bode ill. Hey, Sonia, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It feels like my vacation was 73 years ago, but that's how it
Yeah,
goes.
it does feel like it was a long time ago.
I'm less prepared today than I had hoped to be, but I managed to pull a bunch of things together right at the end. And so we'll see how it goes today. I did mean to pull
Oh,
out
you got the three of us from the LA area. Yay.
the three. Yes, I have
Yeah,
mostly West Coasters this time, don't I?
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, where is the name of the city where you are, Rachel?
Where I am, I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, Portland, Oregon. How far are you from Corvallis?
About an hour and 15 minutes if it's not rush hour traffic.
You don't have access to the beach, do you?
From my place, no. The beach is a lot further west than I am. There's a major river that is a port, thus the port land. That
Ah,
brings
okay.
ships, large ships coming up.
I have a new interest.
Oh,
It's rock hounding.
yeah.
But fossils I've been watching in your area is you don't need to go anywhere. Incredible.
That
Yeah, I'm
and
planning on going. I'm planning on going.
oh, nice. The other thing that's out here that's pretty popular are sunstones that you
Oh
can
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I am just getting a little bit of my sample stuff that I caught while I was trying to rush to clean up my gear.
There is a woman she looks for the fossils and she also looks for sunstones and she makes the jewelry with the sunstones.
Nice.
Um,
Very nice.
She goes to the beach, and then my friend was telling me fossils by the beach.
Yeah,
Never heard of that, but
sure. I mean, so if you got to go somewhere, you'll imagine if you imagine the a lot of the fossils on the beach are going to be like is it ammonites and
yeah, yeah.
more oceanic creatures.
But she finds a lot of sandstones in between the pebbles.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. Okay, so it looks like we're going to be a small crew today, which is okay, because then we won't have lots of people suffering with me as I try to hammer set this very large ring. So today, since we've officially been through the book, now it's start the go back and fill in the gaps. And one of the gaps we have is that we had to wait for the ring to be cast in order to try the Gypsy setting. And I've been incorrectly using Gypsy and Roman interchangeably. In rereading in prep for this, I realized that John describes them as ever so slightly different setting techniques between the two. So what we're going to end up doing, I think, is actually true Gypsy. I hate using that term. It's an offensive term to a lot of people culturally. So I wish there was another name for it. So the Gypsy setting version of it is an approach in which you are hammering into the metal such that it pushes up against the material. Whereas when you're doing the Roman setting, what you're doing is you're creating a channel around the lip of what becomes the lip of the setting, and you're hammering straight down in order to then sort of force a little, like when you're digging in the sand, how it pushes up on either side of that, and that's what forces it to hold it closed. So very subtle difference, but I realized I had been interchanging them. What I suspect is going to happen is that I'm going to, just because of how thick this metal is, I'm probably going to end up with some blend of those two approaches, because he designed it for a more curved top than we ended up with by the time I had over-engineered my simple wax model. So we're going to play around with that.
Rachel, is there which one of those is considered flush setting? Either one?
So he puts it in the flush setting category, and I kind of understand why, because technically the mechanics of it are similar to the mechanics of a flush set, because we're pushing the metal to the boundaries of it, just like, you know, we're using the equivalent of doing the spiral around a small set. We're just doing it writ large. And so I understand why he put it there. I see sort of the roots of it. It's a much older technique, broadly speaking, I suspect, than the tiny little detailed faceted stone setting that we've been seeing, but I haven't ever researched. I don't know how far back, truly, I don't know how far back faceted stones go, much less faceted stones that you can set with that specific flush set technique. So they're cousins, I guess I'd say. Distant cousins, cross-generational cousins.
They are in the same family.
Right, they're in the same family somewhere. So that's one thing that we're going to do. And then because I have not had enough time to prep, I'm going to go with working on settings for one of my favorites that we skipped past, because for whatever reason, John doesn't really do any descriptives around trillion stones, which is one of my absolute favorite cuts. So I'm going to do some faceted trillion setting. I'm going to show the both the step bezel version, and if we have time, we'll start on the basket setting, which is a little more challenging and has a couple branching decisions you have to make. I frankly, when I'm working with, I have a really big thing for large trillions as decorative elements, so really big stones. I don't like those in prong setting. I want a more stable setting, so I tend to put more of my large trillions in a step bezel anyhow, although you can modify them to make them fancier, which I think many of you have already been through my speeches about this, so I'll go quickly. But the class that I'm teaching next is the modified bezel settings. And some of you have taken this class. Let's see if I can get in without getting blurry. So that includes things like taking a traditional step bezel and modifying it with files, with other decorative elements, giving it dimensionality that it didn't look like it would have when it was a plain step bezel. Here's two versions of that concept. I really like this one where you're taking a triangle file in and adding some additional decorative elements. So it still starts life as a step bezel and it just gets fancier. Or you can use various wires and decorative elements to get to a fancier setting. Still a step bezel at its heart. Doesn't have to be the trillion. You can do that. I like making little crown settings like that, which is all decorative wire on traditional step bezel along the edges. And of course, you can do prong modifications so that you're doing a blend of things. So those are some of the things that we talk about in the next class that I'm teaching. And then the class after that in November, that one's in late September. And the class after that in November is the clasps from simple to structural. And what I decided I would do on the final big clasp is I'm going to do one of the enclosed keyhole clasps, because I've recently done a funky version of that and I want to play around with it a little further in that workshop. So that's boatloads of clasps all in one 3-day series. And those are both open for registration. Let me see if I forgot any other business. I wrote my notes up for this one while I was on vacation, so it's been a while. Then let's see. Oh yes, and just a reminder that the live Hollow Forms class will be at the Diane Weimer studio, March 15th through 17th of next year. And that ought to be a fun time. And as a reminder, I'm trying to gather, even if it's just a sentence or two, at least notes for John about how meaningful his book has been to your own practices. That'd be really nice to be able to send him sort of a card or a note of some kind with everybody's thoughts, and I'll use some of the images that people had sent me. And that we are moving to third Wednesdays only from here on out. So there will be no more first Wednesdays. It's only going to be on the third Wednesday, which means our next session after this will be August 16th. I'll do a reminder of those at the end of the session as well. And with that in mind, I realize I have no idea where I put my setting ball, which was on my bench until very recently. And I apologize if my chair is squeaking through the camera. My other chair lost its lift. Where the heck is my setting ball? It was right in front of me mere days ago. Sorry, gang. Hang on a sec. I gotta search and figure out. I think I overly. Oh, there it is. I tucked it away when I was doing some filming. So I'm using my old squeaky saddle chair that is awkward, but at least gets me the height I need. And,
I'm not hearing it, so you're okay.
oh, good. Because it's driving me a little bonkers today. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so we have this ring, and before I actually tuck it away for setting, I want to talk about some of the things that I have done to it since last we met. First, I ground off the casting sprues. There was one here down at the bottom, and there were two on one side or the other. I think probably the opposite side. So I had to grind those down and then clean them up and, sand and file. I also did a rough pass of clearing up some of the porosity. I talked briefly about this last time, but a lot of times a casting will come up with tiny little pock marks in it. If it has bigger than tiny little pock marks, you want it recast usually. But it's just air pockets that have gotten in and metal didn't flow thoroughly. And so there's a few things that one can use. And there's different artists have different preferences for these. Let me zoom back in so you can see these up close. There we go. Oop, come back here. Where am I? There we go. So this is the beater that I grew up being used to. It's got little ball bearings inside of it. And it just goes blap, 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 blap against the metal and sort of burnishes it into place. I had an instructor who taught me to make my own by taking an old dead burr and bending a hook into it, heat treating it and bending a hook into it and then rehardening it. This one terrifies me because it feels out of control. I've grown up being taught that if you have something spinning off center in your flex shaft, that it's going to be dangerous to you. So this one freaks me out because it's intentionally hitting off center, but the goal of it is the same. It's hitting, hitting, hitting. So as it spins, it beats the little spots and burnishes them down. There's definitely other tools out there, but those are the ones that I've been most comfortable with. And for this, I just ran a whole bunch across all the little spots that I found, going from different directions and cleaning it up. It does end up creating a somewhat bumpy texture. So I then went in and did some light sanding and I put it in the pin finisher. This is nowhere near as finished as I would do it if I were finishing this for a customer. But there's a whole lot I would have done differently with this piece if I were finishing it for a customer. I do want to point out a couple of the things that we did that came out in the waxwork. So remember that we dug out a great deal of the wax underneath the setting location, but this is still a heavy freaking ring. I think it's 21 grams of silver or something. It's pretty hefty. But also I did some leveling of the top surface. Man, I can't get you both close up and in frame for some reason today. There we go. So I did some leveling of the top surface because I wanted to make sure I had an area I could hammer down. And then what we have not done, but we need to do next, is make sure that we have a clean fit of our stone. So with that in mind, we got our stone, and when we plonk it in there, we will discover it doesn't quite fit. It has a little overhang up top. So this can be cleaned up with a combination of things, but the fastest to use for something like this is going to be a cylinder burr. So let me grab my cylinder burrs. If I can do this without dropping my Dalek full of burrs. I'm going to back up a little bit so you guys get a better view. Oh, and I'm going to do what I always forget that Carmen reminds me of, but she's not here. And that is spotlight for everyone. So, sorry that if that was being very small on your screen. So we're going to take the burr and bring it around the inside and widen that up a little bit. If I can figure out where the heck my large ball burrs are. Where are my large ball burrs? I mean, not ball burrs. I need a cylinder burr for this. Good. Maybe I'd only kept my cylinder burrs in the
What
other.
millimeter cylinder burr are you thinking?
Because this is big, I'm gonna go big. So this one is really, with a cylinder burr, what you need is the size that you can control while moving through the space you're working on. So I'm gonna get the largest one I can that doesn't look like it's gonna eat too much material away. I don't have anything more exacting than that because I'm not going for creating a lip. I'm going for creating an opening that's bigger than it is now. So let me see what I've got for decent quality. So I'm going to go with a good sized burr. And this is quite literally just a cleanup exercise around the inside of the outer wall. Smoothing it and taking it down just enough that I can get a snug fit, because this setting requires a snug fit. So do a little bit, check it often. Do a little bit, check it often. My stone set isn't terribly far off. A little bit more at the ends. And I think I'm going to avoid taking more off the sides because that looks, if anything, kind of loose. Or life wouldn't help. I mean, it wouldn't hurt. I still got a smidge holding it up at the ends. And I'm trying to keep my walls still parallel. Perpendicular to the ground, because that's, I want an upright wall that I'm going to then push down. I don't want to cut in or angle outward either direction. Oop, I can feel it almost there. But it's not resting all the way down. It's just getting in there enough that I probably need my sticky wax. And this is definitely going to be a bit of a challenge because I can see my sides have a little bit of gap. So we're going to see what I can get for snug fit. I'm hoping I can at least get the ends well fitted. That's getting there. Close we are to resting. So what I'm looking for from the back side is my stone sitting down on the flat that I've got below it? And if it's not, I'm going to need to keep cleaning it up a little bit more. That may include seeing if I have any catch points on the resting wall, on the inner form. And there may be one direction it sits better than the other. How did it get more snug than it was a minute ago when I tried it? There we go. Put it in more upright. No, still up on one side.
So Rachel, can you answer a question while you're grinding?
Maybe if I can hear it.
That's true. I just wanted to know how you made that top surface flat. Did you turn the ring over and put it on sandpaper? Did you file across it?
So when we did the wax, it was originally fairly flat. All
Yeah.
I was cleaning it up, but the biggest problem was the two lumps from the casting sprues. So I first ground those, and I'm pretty controlled when I use one of my grinding wheels. I can see when to stop, so I stop just shy of the last layer of it coming off. So there's sort of a like catch your finger edge to it. And then I move over to files next. And depending on the piece, I can either get it all with files or I go in with sandpaper afterwards.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Pardon?
Thank you.
Sure. So I don't have any kind of camera angle that's going to show this for you, but what I'm watching for is underneath. Can I get underneath where it sits on the lip? Actually, let me Sharpie the lip, and then you guys will see what I'm talking about. So this edge that I'm working on here is what I want it resting neatly on. And the only way for me to see that with this semi-opaque stone is to look from back and back and see whether I'm seeing gapping. Because it's such a rough setting, it's hard to tell which part is the levelness of my setting and which part of it is that the stone's not actually sitting as low as I need it to. So what I've got now is good fit end to end, but I'm not yet happy with how it's resting on one of these sides. And I have to figure out why it's not resting more down. And I think my problem is right about here, that I'm still grabbing the corner of the stone. I'm going to take a little bit more down there. Do another pass to make sure I'm as level as I can be. Yeah. Closer, I was on the right track, so I think I just need a little bit more out of that corner. And that has me a lot happier. It also is, relatively speaking, for a large cab, relatively flush. I'm going to pull that out one more time so you guys can see just how much is resting below the surface. So it's about half of the stone that goes in on this situation. I could have gone deeper. I could carve it down further if I wanted to, but because we did our carving with the edge walls in mind for pushing over, I don't want to carve it now down. I've got as little coverage as I do already, so it's going to be hard to push in. And let me see if there's anything I can do to zoom enough that you guys will see. Oh, I know, if I blew them on the side walls, then you'll be able to see where I'm worried that I won't be able to easily set it.
I can't figure it out. What is it that you're going to push down? Because
Right. So think about, this is where that comparison to the actual flush setting comes in. Because if you think about it, what we're doing is we are compressing the metal in the direction of the inside of the stone. We've done it on a couple of other settings. We first did it on our heavy wall bezels. Oops, where am I going? There we go. We did on our heavy wall bezels. It was a more of a downward push, which moves the metal out of the way. And then we also did it on the small flush setting where when we burnish, what we're doing is we're pushing, we're intensifying the pressure around the stone in such a way that if we see it writ large, get my magical pens out. Haven't had the whiteboard in a while. So when we're doing those little flush sets, right, we have the stone sitting either at or below the surface barely. And what we're doing with our metal wall in that case is we are burnishing it right here, making a little dip on all the way around by pushing down. And by doing that, it's pushing this tiny little bit of metal up and over in the little flush sets, right? So that we get that, that's what you see when you look from the top down and you've got your stone. And then you get that shiny little burnish all the way around. That's that channel right there that we're pushing down, shining up as we push the metal in, as we burnish the metal into itself. It's hardening it, it's pushing it around it. So the same holds true when we're doing this large gypsy setting. It's just that our material is much larger, right? And so instead of using a tiny little burnisher, we're going to be using hammer and force with a setting, with like a chasing tool or something along those lines, so that what we're doing is we're pushing thump, thump, thump to make the equivalent of that little channel, thereby forcing the rest of the material in on itself. You don't have to go far, and that's why this is done on big settings, not small, because what we're doing in this case, we've got it sitting here, and it's a snug fit. That's why the snug fit is important. It's resting on its little lip there. So we have metal doing this, right? And by hammer forcing, and in the one version we're doing this, and in the other version we're doing straight down in a channel, but either one is going to go chunk, 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 and push this metal out of the way towards the stone. And so we only have to have enough to change from having this tiny little gap to having it forced right up against the stone. It's just a small movement that's going to hold it in place. Does that make more sense?
Yes, now I understand.
So how successful we'll be is going to depend on the strength of my hands and these tools. And if I fail to have that strength, then we're going to move to the power hammer tool that I have, the flex shaft, or the Fordham rather, that I have. So when last we met, we were in good shape on this, but I was going to show you guys the blue that's gapping, the area that's gapping that's worrying me. No, wrong way. Yeah, I always get these backwards. Okay, so here and here, if I tilt it, you can see I blued the inside wall, and the fact that we can see that inside blue means that it's not as snug a fit as I would like. I can see a little bit of gapping down to the base of the setting, which is going to be hard to overcome, especially along here is my biggest gap, and then right in here is to a lesser extent there's a gap. So at the very least, I'm going to be holding it in by pushing down here and here at the ends, because those are nice and snug. That's what I've had to clean up. But I'm not confident I'm going to get a good, clean, close fit all the way around, which is what I really should have in a setting like this. So let me back out. Oh, back out, not forward. Back out enough for you guys to see the setup. And then we're going to clean up our stone because we won't have another chance, and clean up our setting where I put all that blue marker on. There is my paper towels. Again, I would not just be cleaning it up like this. I'd go back and properly, fully polish it. I want it to sparkle before I lock the stone in, because it's hard to get clean underneath without steam cleaning and all kinds of other gunk. But for the sake of this exercise, we're just gonna get the blue and clean that off. Most of the blue, some of the blue. Sharpie's gotten down into the crevices. I can probably do, I don't know if I want to do an ultrasonic clean of this after this stone is in, because it's got a pretty solid line through it that's likely to be weak. But I can also, if I had a steam cleaner, I could steam clean it carefully once the stone is in. Otherwise, it's just sort of SOL for right underneath the stone and polishing it. So I'm just cleaning up the stone to get all the wax that I was using to hold it in place off. Make sure any detritus is gone. And then, of course, I forgot to mark which direction I wanted it to sit. Let's see, is it that? No, it's the other way. Sure, it doesn't fit once I get it all cleaned up. Well, you fit a minute ago. I have to put a little bit of wax back on. Down, clicks into place. I like hearing that click. And now put it in our device. You could do this in the book. John has it on a ring mandrel. You just want something that you can support your ring mandrel with, like a vise or something that's going to keep it really, really solidly in place. Because we're going to be putting a lot of downward force on this. And I cannot for the life of me lay hands on my chasing hammer. So maybe it's hiding behind my other. I'm going to use an old ball peen hammer instead. That chasing hammer has gotten to. But there's a few different tools we can use. You can make your own. You can use the, I hid all of my tools while I was opening all those stones. So you can make your own with a nail, as we've done for other things. He's using in his setting of it, he's using a sort of a rectangularly blunted end. So that's why I pulled that out. And he doesn't talk much in this about whether he wants it polished or not. He tends to like to move to the polished stuff after, because you get a good grip. So he usually, on a lot of his setting tools, he'll do a single burnish of rough file against them, just to give a little bit of catch, and then he'll go back over it with other tools to clean it up. And we are, if you're following along at home, we are on page 2. We are on page, where did we go? So we just finished doing our trimming on page 155, and we are about to start the work on page 156, which I have failed to do a filing because mine is not, he's got a round one, which is something that you can file that channel in. So I'm skipping making a channel and working with this shape. We're going to do more like what he's doing on page 159. There's just not a way to get the angle. So 159 Roman setting is what we're gonna end up doing. And I'm gonna actually mark myself a line to follow because this is a snug fit at a few points. And what I want is just outside of the edge that comes closest to the stone. That's sloppy. Let's try that a little bit cleaner. So I'm trying to leave myself a tiny, like 1/4 millimeter silver band between my mark and the stone as my target for the tool. And I'm going to be pushing straight down as I tap. Just like with our other settings, we're starting with a north, south, east, west to try and hold it in place. My east-west is going to be pretty far away from the stone because of that gap that I was talking about. Hold this a little more tightly than I have. In fact, I'm going to try my north-south first, and then we'll go from there. So I'm just tapping straight down at that line point, which is just shy of the inner edge. It'd be a lot easier if I weren't hot enough that my goggles are fogging up. And then I'm going to work my way east-west, which again, not going to really do a lot for holding the stone right now because it's too far away, but it's a start. So even that little bit is starting to snug it in. I'm betting it's mostly the north-south that did the trick. Again, straight down. And let me see if the zoom will let you see, because of the marker, you might actually be able to see the indications of movement on this if I get the position right for you. Yep. And maybe take the light away. So if you can see the little shiny bits there, there, and there. They are ever so slightly pushed in because of the straight up and down hammering that I've been doing. So I'm now going to continue to go back to, see if I can keep it in view for you guys while doing this hammering. I'm going to go back to working my whole line around the piece. Is it better when I'm this close, even if my hand is blocking your view, or is it better when I'm farther away so you can see the hammer?
I think that looks good.
That looks good. Okay. And I'll keep working here, trying to give you guys some kind of view, even though I'm a righty, so my hand is blocking from the left. Do not hold it like this. This is so that you guys can see the action.
We cannot see the action now.
Oh yeah, so it's too close. Let's see.
Yeah.
Here, let me split the difference. How's that? No, you still can't see the
That's
hammer.
great. That's great.
Right there? Okay. So I'm putting a straight up and down. And I'm going to do my whatever the cardinal coordinates, the northeast, southeast, etc. Again, following that same slightly outside of, oops, there's my stone popping up, so I didn't get it as snug as I thought. I go back and do a little bit more at the north-south. Remember the term for the diagonal half coordinates. And then I'm going to just start working this channel from above, straight up and down, all the way around. I'm trying to make a divot all the way around the setting. And the other thing I may do is I may switch tools because this one is making a lot of marks. I probably need something a little more polished. So I may try using, I have Victoria Lansford's beautiful, beautiful chasing tools. And some of those might help because they're a smoother fit, or I may go back and clean up after I've done the heavy lift with the setting. Now, one of the delights about this being done on a cast piece is that a casting comes to us annealed. The only hardening I've done has been that that bit where I would work on the holes and stuff like that. So I did a sort of a surface hardening, but not a true hardening of the material. Still not holding. I haven't got my hold down enough. Let's see though. Now I feel like I've moved it out of position. So again, the goal is to create a push down of material that just sort of embraces the edge of the stone until it's locked in, because it is wider below the push in than it is above. Sometimes the tone of the hammer blow will give you an indication as you get close to the stone, it sort of goes flatter. So if you start hearing that, take a little bit of caution, back off from that area and work another area a little bit more. I'm starting to get those kinds of sounds at one end of this, which means I think I'm going to work the opposite end until it's in similar state to hold it. I'm going to pause there and zoom in again for you guys so you can see that's sort of a first course of going through.
Yeah, I want to see that.
It's just like the picture on page 159.
Is it really? How magical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's true. Uh-huh.
I'm not sure I'd agree that it's just like the drawing, but it always looks nicer in print. That's what I'll say. I'll use that excuse. So this is now starting to get held in here. If I had a closer fit on the sides, this course would really be locking it in. But because it's got a little too much room, there's some wobble. So the areas that I definitely have locked down are right about here. I can feel it. And right about here, I can feel it. So the north-south is holding it in, as I predicted, given my gapping. So I'm going to I'm going to actually switch to see if the chasing tool from Victoria's set, come on. If Victoria's chasing tool gives me a smoother run. Was there a question that I interrupted?
I just wanted to see at which angle are you holding the little nail thing, or the thingy, oh, okay,
For the Roman setting, and
Okay,
that's super important because it's easy otherwise to slip and hit the stone. So
Right.
the goal
Rachel?
of press
Yeah.
downward.
Then would you clarify his sentences on page 159? The first column, it says the rounded face of the punch is held just outside and parallel to the edge of the rim. The far end of the tool is tilted out slightly.
Oh, so then I'm not doing the room and I'm doing what he suggested on the earlier one, because one of them was a straight up start.
Yeah, well, that's on the next column. He says go straight up and down, but I was just curious about the slightly tilt.
So hang on a sec, let me double check, because I think then that I'm doing the gypsy style. It was such a subtle difference between the two.
Yeah,
Push the entire height of the wall.
well, and my thinking was that if you tilted a little bit from those sides that were gapping, maybe that would push
Yeah.
those in.
Yeah, but so one of the things that I'm battling that he's not in his round one is I have the flattened surface. So his is domed in the
Yeah.
version, he's got a dome. And so
Yeah.
that angle makes more sense. For me, I have to first get a spot or else I'm gonna hit and skid off into the stone. But I'm also pretty sure that in the gypsy setting, maybe the first act was to push to create a channel by pushing downward. Back on one of the earlier pages, but I could be wrong. I'm playing. I am working at what I got. Yeah, that's gonna slip right away. I think I'm gonna try another pass with the hammer, and yeah, let's try and tilt now that I've I want to put my channel in a little deeper because I'm still reticent. I feel like I'm gonna slip off of this top edge until I have something more to grip. So I'm gonna do one more pass of the downward tapping, trying to make my channel more channel-y. And then I'll do that tip. Shouldn't have gotten fancy with my wax is what it comes down to. Okay, so now I have enough of there's a tiny little lift of a lip that I can just catch my fingernail on at the edge. I don't know if you guys can hear that click, but I'm seeing enough of a lip that now I feel like I'll have at least a stopper if I tilt a little bit more. I really feel like one of the good chasing tools will probably be better for me. If I can do this without slipping. So what I'm using is this liner tool that has a high polish on it. So that's why I'm a little worried. And I am now doing that tilt out. Thank you, Wendy, for pointing that out, but I'm not tilting out much because I really am still sort of challenged by the flat top surface of my particular ring. I can absolutely see that if this were round, this would be a lot easier.
If it was a round setting, like a round stone, that's what you mean?
No, what I mean is if the dome, so in his drawings, all of his versions are a curved, they
Yeah.
curve up. Mine,
Yeah.
I flat because we got fancy with all the extras that I was embellishing.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
the flat is what's making me worry about slipping into the stone. But I wouldn't have quite such a problem because I'd be working uphill kind of if it were curved. So the experience I'm having, just because it's such small changes that you guys can't really tell by watching, is that it is work hardening this metal fast. So the first two passes, I could feel a real shift of the material. But this pass, I'm fighting a lot harder for it. And definitely the polished tool is a lot harder to control. It keeps wanting to slip out of my little channel. So I think I might make a few, for future such things, I might make a few variations on the nail. Like I might make one that is narrower because I like the narrow line I'm using right now. It's getting a really nice channel for me. But I might still want the rougher steel until I get to my final passes. And then I use these polish tools to clean them up. You know, just like when you're building, when you're hammering out, when you're forging a bowl or something and you do your stretching courses and then you do your cleanup planishing courses. Similarly, I do planishing passes on this. And if I had a lot more experience on this kind of a setting, I can tell you that I would probably not be stopping and starting so much, but would instead be doing this sort of slide it along and chatter. But I'm not confident in my personal control of the tools. So I would instead, you know, if I were strong with it, I would just be going along like this, passing it, moving as I go, adjusting the set and the angle as I move through it. But when I try to do that, I'm really eating up the edge with.
So you feel like the liner tool makes a difference? Is it better or?
So I'm going to show you what it's looking like in just a sec. I want to finish this course. I'm liking the liner tool. I think what I want is a combination. And I think what I really want is different sizes of them. So I'll see if I have a wider liner. The one that was my instinct to use is a little too curvy. Come on, focus. Focus. Still too close. Hang on. There we go.
Perfect.
Yeah, you see how deep it's going in? The liner is really helping me engage that channel. Oops, sorry, it went out of focus again. Come on. There we go. So think how best to show what I'm seeing. So this stone is set. It's not coming out at this point, but it's messy along those gapping areas. It's nicely held. Like I probably shouldn't do too much more at the north-south. And then a couple of spots here are starting to come in close. But so with this is the tool I started with. So that you get into frame there. That's that handmade from a nail.
Yeah.
File. And then this is the liner tool, which is much narrower and that curved high polish look. And that's what's getting that cleaner look. But I think I want something that is shaped like the liner, but more chubby like this. I'm going to actually see if I can control it now that there's a good channel, but my fear is it's going to slip a little bit. So I'm going to try a pass with this bigger setting tool. And I'm not angling too much because it really is feeling like it's going to slip out of channel. In fact, I may even want to, this one I may want to angle the other way.
Well, and that's what he says when you finally establish that channel to go straight up and down.
Yeah, so I may have them in backwards order because I'm concerned about the flat surface. But I'm actually, this is my instinct here is telling me to tap. So you see how I'm at a slight angle this way instead of straight up and down. My instinct is telling me that I'll get a little more movement out of the metal if I'm slightly tipped in towards the stone on this pass on the areas that are not coming all the way in yet the way I want them to. But I can play around with that a little bit and see. I may just never be able to get this close because I didn't have a snug enough sidewall fit. Oh, it's moving. I'm really focusing on just the one side gap right now, and then see if I can come back to the other side to join it. This is definitely a good tool for making the channel more consistent. And I think ultimately with a lot of passes, it would really shine it up and clean it up nicely.
Is it okay to talk right now?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, it's Deborah Long,
Hey.
and I just wanted to comment, in learning how to do chase and repousse,
Yeah.
we wound up making our own tools and liners out of tool steel.
Nice.
But I'll tell you what the really incredible thing was, I started learning how to make my tools out of Delrin.
Yeah.
And those are wonderful. And I could make them as small as a liner you're making. So I kind of wound up duplicating my chase and repousse tools in Delrin, just because it's a gentler movement of the metal,
Huh.
which works great, of course, when it's not hardened, from overworking the metal.
Yeah.
And it really then, when I went into stone setting and learning how to do that, they were great.
Nice.
So I know the first tools we made for stone setting were brass.
Yep.
We kind of shaped them oval and rounded the tops to be able to do stone setting. But then I kind of shifted over to the Delrin.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was great.
So one of
So
my
you're
about-
able to get enough force with that Delrin
Yes,
that it moves it?
and it's because of the size. Most of my Delrin tools, trying to think about how big, they're probably 10 millimeters in diameter.
Huh.
And they're kind of stubby, you know, depending on how long you make them. So yeah, you do get a good bit of force, and I'm using a chasing tool when I'm,
Nice.
using them. So
Yeah, I'm not
anyway,
sure if you were on when I said I can't for the life of me lay hands on my chasing hammer, so I'm winging it.
that's a tough way to wing it, but you know what? That's a great tool. But I hate using those little hammers because I always miss and hit my fingers.
So the nice thing about Delrin, among other things of it being a cool material, is that it is now available for 3D printers.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow, how wonderful is that?
So if you can
That's
think
space age.
you can print it, yeah. A friend of mine has a printer that's able to do it, and we're looking to buy a batch. It's not cheap. Delrin never is.
I think I used to buy it at Tap Plastics,
Yeah.
and they're kind of everywhere, and you can get it pretty cheap there.
It's the spools you need for the printer that are the
Yeah, now that's not cheap. No.
right. So once we get a chance, we're gonna all go in on buying a spool or two and see what we can print.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to sign off now.
Oh, okay.
If anybody's interested, I can post a picture of what they look like.
Sure.
And they look like a scruffy set of tools, but they work.
Nice. Yeah, Jane
Yeah,
Redmond
post them.
make a lot of tools out of Delrin too. She does a lot with Delrin, and it really is a super fabulous material. Okay, so that pass did some really nice cleanup, gang.
I can do it under chat. Let's see.
And so we're really set now. Not that we weren't before. There's no movement. I've still got more than I'm happy with here a little bit and here a lot. But the areas that I am not happy with have gone down to here to here and here to here. Those are areas that need a little bit more push in, but I think I might be able to get it there. Those two blue areas with a little more. I think I probably will alternate between the deeper push and then the soft curved to go on it. I have no freaking out idea how I would manage to file this. That's another benefit of John's round topped ring, is that you can access it to file it. And I think I'm going to have to do mine with wheels. I'll probably use my much beloved Swifty wheels on it around those crevices.
It's really transformed since you started this today.
Say again?
It's really transformed since you first started it.
Yeah. I mean, so it's, again, there's the benefit of it being, I'm going to take a break while I get some liquid in me, or else I'm not going to be able to talk to you guys for much longer. It's really intriguing to me just how important that it being annealed from casting is to this process, because you can really quite literally feel with each course of hammering that it is getting harder and harder, and that's what's holding the stone down. Like I can sort of feel the textural difference in the two layers of material, the outer material that I haven't hammered and that which I have. And I now understand sort of more intimately why he's put this in the flush setting category, because in essence, when we do our burnish down for the small faceted stones, this is all we're doing. It's just slower and steadier. So I feel like if ever I find myself a time traveler back to Roman times, and they hand me some tools to work with, I might be able to make the least apprentice proud of their own work by comparison. But I would know the concept of it from this kind of a setting.
You said you do a lot of casting, right?
I used to do a series of cast work. I don't anymore, and I've never done my own casting other than like water cast and sand cast and various things like that. I don't do spin casting or vacuum casting, any of those.
But you do have pieces that you need to have the caster make for you.
I do, yeah. So I send it out. I send my waxes out to be cast.
Okay, what I wanted to ask you is, do you have duplicates? Or do you have
So that's a great question about waxwork. When I am casting, I recommend, unless there is a really specific reason not to, always have a mold made, even if you're only making one of them. Because then one, it does two things for you. If you have by accident introduced porosity into your wax, a bubble that you didn't get clear or whatever, the mold and then cast model will make sure that you're casting from a clean, unbubbled, untainted wax. The other thing it does is make sure that if anything goes wrong in the initial casting, you will get another chance to make the piece over again. But it's expensive. If you're making lots of cast pieces and you make molds out of all of it, it can get really, really expensive. I know a lot of professionals who are good enough at their casting and good enough at their wax working that they make the wax once and they cast directly from it. If I'm doing wax work, it's because it's something I want to productionalize. So I tend to want the molds so I can make more and then go back and make a second order if I need to, kind of thing.
Right. Or if the guy that is casting for you dies and his family throws away all the molds, then you're gonna be like my friend, dead.
So I worked with a caster for a long time who kept the molds for you, but they ran out of room, and so they started sending them back. And that was the problem for me, was that I didn't have the rooms that were air conditioned and cool and all the things that they needed. So within about 3 years of me getting them back, they had melted. Thankfully, by then I was out of that kind of production, and it would push me to make new designs if I needed it. But there are people who sell molds from manufacturers that have been around for decades, if not some of them probably even centuries, that you can get. You can buy the molds and buy the castings or buy the wax models. The other advantage of doing a mold is that you can do iterative designs, meaning you can design a base piece, have them make a bunch of waxes, ship the waxes back to you, and then you buy those waxes and make a next version of it and so on. And so you could make something that has variety to it.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really nice.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm ready to try another pass. So I'm going to go back to the other machine, the other screen.
And is there a reason why you're not using a hammer hand piece?
Yes, because I wanted to try it the way that John has done it by hand.
Yes. I forget about John. Yeah.
Forget about John. We've been working on John's book for 1.5 years. Don't forget about John.
Sorry, no, my girlfriend bought one of John's book, and I told her the whole story.
Good.
So I never forget him.
So I could absolutely do this with a hammer hand piece and had it parked near me in case I needed to. But frankly, having done it this way, I'm not sure I would be as in control with a hammer hand as I am with these step at a time passes. So I had that ready in case I felt like my hand strength wasn't up to it.
Right.
But it's something a little bit more viable than I thought by hand. So I'm going to now focus on those areas that I said weren't really close in enough and see if I can get them any deeper. And I'm sort of at this point, I'm using a combination of straight up and down and slight outward angle, just to try and make the material move inward again. And it's moving a little. sort of getting to the bounds of how tight I can make it, I suspect, given how far away it started life. Well, maybe I'm wrong. I should have faith in the process. It is definitely getting closer. Wowza, it's getting a lot closer. All right, well, that side is looking good. Now let's hope we can do the same on the other. So at this point, on using my gut for when I'm upright versus when I'm tilting, I'm starting by digging my way in a little bit further down until it's like I've scooped up a little bit of the metal. And that's when I start to tip it outwards so that I'm now pushing that little lip that I've built up back towards the stone. So rather than now that I'm at the clean it up stage, rather than doing a full pass of upright versus not upright, it's work the problem more than anything else.
And is there any way that you could reverse the, because we don't see the most important thing we're not seeing. We just see the back of your hand.
Oh, so that I can show you what I'm doing. I can try doing some lefty hammering, but I don't know if this is going to succeed. Oy vey. I don't know how to control a hammer with my left hand. Is that better?
Yeah.
So I'm alternating. Oh my gosh, I'm going to hit my knuckles so many times going lefty. I'm alternating between being straight down on it
And at the angle.
at an angle outward to push what I've sort of scooped up by angling.
I got it. I got it.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the other way or else this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want you to bleed.
Oh, I wasn't like worried about bleeding. It was worried about how messy the hits were getting
Oh,
on the roughing up of the stone.
thank you, Rachel.
Sure.
Okay.
Anything for my fans, you know.
140.
All right, so one side I've got pretty darn close to what I want. The other side is fighting a little harder. And it's not like I can anneal this in mid-process. Well, I'm not quite sure why I waited so long to get a graver's ball. So I use the right end of the hammer. I'm really quite impressed at how much movement there still is in the metal this far along in the process,
Yeah, that's incredible.
especially given how thick walled we made it to begin with. But I should trust in the process because principally all we're doing is sort of isolating a segment of the material to get it where it needs to go. I think I may be reaching the limits of how much gap I can move. But let's try another pass quickly with the rounder one and see if that encourages it in the right direction. And then we'll do a little cleanup work. I would not recommend you practice this setting with, say, opals. This is a little nerve-wracking. Actually, can you guys hear the difference in the tap versus?
You can't really hear the tap.
Oh, shoot. I don't think I can get any of my microphones much closer to this. So I'll try to describe it. When I am over a gap, it's a little hollower and a little deeper tap. When I'm over the stone, it's a little flatter and higher pitched. I'm also deep enough down in the channel making here that I can do a little bit better job of that, just sort of sliding it along and tapping that you really want in a good chasing and repoussé movement. I'm getting close enough to done with it that I'm nervous about overhitting and cracking the stone at this point. I think I'm going to pause there and show you guys another close-up, and then I'm going to see what happens when we put our wheel on it to clean it up a little bit. Always with the wrong direction. Focus for me. So that's a pretty heavy duty channel at that point
Yeah.
around the piece.
There. Oh, wait. Oh, so
And
you're gonna
Sorry.
clean it.
say again?
Now you're going to clean all the marks?
I'm going to clean up the marks. Ideally, I would be good enough at my chasing and repoussé that I could hammer them out. But I think I'm going to have to use tools. This area is still a little gappy. This area has been pretty well removed of gap. So I managed to get one side nice and closed. The other side is going to collect dirt from about here to about here, which is a bummer, but I think I'm sort of maxed on how much I can push in that direction. So John's version of it, he's using first a file in some cases, but then he also shows down on the bottom of 159 that he's using some kind of a rubberized wheel, which is what I'm going to go with. I think I've talked to you a lot about my favorite, which is the Swifty brand. You go through them as a disposable. So I'm sorry, I got to scooch back out for you guys to see again. So they're disposable. They start life in a couple different sizes. You can file them to put a more of a knife edge on them, or some of them are actually sold knife edge. I'm looking for one that sort of fits the profile of my current channel. And the nice thing about them is they don't risk the stone, but they do a lot of burnishing of material. Does get hot still. Friction's a thing. Come on, focus for me. There we go. See that nice burnish, clean channel we've got now? I probably would go a little bit more, a few more passes to get a little bit more of the roughness out of that. But that's not bad for my first big Roman setting.
No, it looks nice from here.
I'm gonna take it out and show you guys a little bit more overall how the piece is looking. Ginormous. It's a huge piece. But I'm okay with that.
That's my kind of ring.
Yeah, it's seriously solidly set. Like that stone you're gonna have to break out of there if you want to take it out.
Yes.
There we go.
Rachel, remind me what kind of stone is that? A chalcedony or what?
This is just a cheapo agate that I had floating around because I don't
Agate.
tend to work with basic cabs in basic round or oval cabs. So it was one of the ones that I had probably from one of my student classes a while back.
Mhm.
So it's
Ooh,
not
lovely.
It's nice. I like it.
a little polish on that, maybe black in the little branches that I roughed in there. See what it looks like finished. So there we go. Questions on that one, gang? Okay. So I think that was the last official have to try it setting in the book. So now we move back to want to try it or want to redo it series. And for me, you guys had asked for a couple different things. You'd asked for trillion and you'd asked for unusual cuts. And again, trillion is always my favorite. So I've picked a couple out to play around with. And then I'm betting we will only get to do the step bezel for that. But I'll talk about it in the context of coming back in a later session to do the unusual cut. Because most unusual cuts, the challenge is that they are a combination of curvilinear and straight edges or corners, making it a little more challenging than the average for laying out. And I suspect that there are all kinds of approaches, not the least of which is a lot more measuring than I do. I have got to switch off my saddle chair, guys, because it is killing me. There's a reason I don't use that chair much anymore. So the trillions are a nice starting point for curve versus angle, because it's gentle angles as opposed to a harsh cut or a cut, even worse, a cut back when you have a concave cut in a stone. It gets extra hard to build the setting for. There's all different cuts, and trillions, trilliums, and trillions are all triangles with differing degree of curvature to them. And I can never remember which is which, but I'm talking about the ones with curves, which I think are trillions. A lot of these will come in all sides in equilateral triangle form. Others will come in sort of a pointier towards one end of the triangle than the other. sort of somewhere between a pear and a more triangular shape, I guess. I don't have a good way to say that. So just know that a lot of times they're going to have awkward, don't fit except from one direction. Like this one is a badly cut trillion, meaning it's got unequal points and curves. This is sort of a dud of a point compared to this one. And it's got a very fat belly. You'll find that a lot on inexpensive stones, is they're trying to get more carats for you to pay for and bigger, bulkier. So I'm going to put that one aside as not terribly easy to set. And I think I'm going to go with a reasonably well cut, looks like this is a cushion top trillion as our starting point. And it also looks reasonably well cut in terms of being close to equilateral. Can it be equilateral if it has curves? I don't know, but you guys know what I mean. The lengths of the sides are the same. And we are going back to our very first chapter. We're going back to our very first settings chapter, not the first chapter in the book. Back to chapter 3, I think it is, for bezel setting, but towards the later half when we're doing step bezels. I will give you a reminder that way back when, about 14 months ago when we were working this chapter, it was, there are two choices. There's either the make it in stages, so an outer bezel and an inner bezel, or there's the make your own step in a flat form and then use that. 99 times out of 100, I'm making the outer and the inner separately, but especially when there's points and curves, that makes it easier for me. I find that I can make a shape that fits well, and then I can make another shape of the same shape that fits inside that shape. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to use 22 gauge. I got to make sure. Oh, shoot. I don't know whether that's fine silver or sterling, so I'm going to go find another piece. I'm going to go 22 gauge, but this is one of those ones that we could do a heavy wall bezel. We could do a thinner wall bezel. Depending on the size of the stone, you can get much thinner. I wouldn't go much thinner than 26 gauge probably. You can go to 28 for small stones, but it really can get ugly if you do. Doesn't hold the stone terribly well. And there's 28 gauge, which would make 26 gauge. 4 gauge. Maybe we're going at 24 gauge instead of 22 gauge today, because that's what I have. Okay, I have to run through my materials. And just like with any of our faceted stone settings, we're going to be focusing on making sure that the coulette does not poke people. And then we go and look at how high it needs to be after that to be appealing to us. So I'm going to give myself wrong direction, a smidge of extra, because I know I'm going to sand some down. I know some of it is going to trim away because of the lip. And I'm going to make a strip. Oops, I'm not zoomed out far enough for you guys, am I? Oh, see, a little less glary. All right, so I'm making a strip of material. In this case, I'm working in sterling. You can work in fine silver, but it's way easier to set. I would go heavier gauge if I were working in fine silver, because the reason it's easier to set is it can also come back up around the setting. It can wear faster and loosen up easier. And I'm going to make sure that I've got fairly clean cut ends on at least one end of this. Tap it down a little bit if it's gotten a little curvy on me. I'm going to just use my fabulous Bonnie Doon hammer that I love so much. But you could use a mallet, or you could use a wooden hammer, was what used to be my favorite before these came along. Right, and then as with any stone, except those hideous emerald cut, we don't want to be starting in a corner because that'll make it too stiff at the corner with the solder line there. So we're going to start halfway along one of our lines. And if I have a nice clean edge on it, I'm going to start with my half round pliers. I live and die for half round pliers when I'm doing a lot of my settings, because I can start to build in the curve that I need before I even make any folds in it. So I'm just getting a starting point, and I'm going to mark with a Sharpie where I'm going to put my bend. If I don't have it perfectly on this bend, it's okay. This is my first corner, so I don't need to. Oh, the other thing is mark a corner of your stone so that you know where you started. So you can always, if it is slightly differently sized on side to side, you're always working the same point to point.
Which page is this trillion?
So
set?
this is not exactly on any page because he doesn't show us any trillions, but we are broadly working on page 61, making a shoulder or bearing bezel.
Okay, 61. Okay.
Actually, starting on 60, he starts to talk about them, right? So we're doing an outer wall and then we're doing an inner wall, but right now we're working the outer wall. And this should be familiar from literally our first work sessions, probably second and third. We were doing regular bezels. It was probably about our 5th session when we started doing the step bezels. And I'm going to be doing a corner here. I mean, a sharp line here. So I'm using my square, and whenever I've managed to toss my scribe lately, keeps moving around on me.
Sonia,
Yes.
page 67, it says construction shoulder bezels for triangular stones.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, he does give us, no, so this is not gonna be quite the same as the triangular stone. Well, I
Yeah.
guess maybe he does the construction. He does closely equate to what we're doing, but he tends to do the sharper.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing a little bit more precision on those, and he's doing on a true triangle. He's recommending we do an angle and then a flat, right? So we do 2 pieces to make our walls. On these, we're going to build them all the way around.
So you are making a bezel for a trillion, a stone that has a cule?
Making a bezel for a faceted trillion. Yep.
And what are you going to do with the cule?
It's going to be hidden down in the bezel, right?
Okay, got it.
Or that's actually a great question. Or I do this a lot. I love setting good stones upside down, as long as they're not going to be the top of a ring, because that'll get around too much. But it makes for a really, like if it's I'll often do that in a clasp, because if it's a nicely cut stone, so it's not pokey, but it's still a good point, it helps somebody when they're fumbling around behind their neck to find the spot that is the push down on a clasp.
Oh, that's clever.
So I've made my mark, and I'm going to, oops, except that's a really not clean angle. Let me double check that. Don't have as straight a line cut as I thought we did. There we go. All right, and then I'm taking the saw blade in the saw with a moderate size blade. I'm using a 2/0 as my default. And I probably need a little wax. And I'm going to just mark in, just like we did when doing corners on other things. I'm marking in the scribe line a little deeper. Just setting up enough of a channel that I can now file with first my triangle file. Keeping in mind that if we were doing a square corner, we would start with a triangle and only touch up with a square for the very last pass. A triangle file is going to cut too deeply. So you want to be very cautious about it, meaning it's too wide of an angle for a true trillion shape, because we have a slightly wider angle than we're going to get off of the corner of the triangle. So it just means to be light touch, cautious about how far you go through. And don't use too big of a triangle file. Use the smallest, most delicate one you can find for the job. Remembering to switch back and forth. And we're going to about 2/3 of the way down. And then we're going to bend. And I'm going to use my half round pliers to start putting that curve back in as I make the bend. Remember that I had a side that I started with. So I'm going to work from that point that I marked the dot on. And before I go much further, I want to make sure my curve is actually curving enough on the side I've started. We're going to have a chance to finish meeting that curve. But then I also need to curve the side that I've just cut. So I'm going to go in, and one of the reasons I really like the half rounds is, let me see if I can show you this. If I need to, I can use that half round inside of a corner like this to gently widen it without flexing the whole thing back and forth. So not only am I using it to get the curve that follows my stone, that's probably a little too wide, but I can also use it for gentle movement of the corners. And again, do both sides equally if you're going to. Come back here, little dot. All right, and then once I've got a good curve, I'm going to once again mark my corner. And one of the reasons I have a preference for the two-part model instead of the make your own two-layered sheet is that I can correct more easily when I have separate parts, because I'm going to be making the outer wall. And if it comes out a smidge too small, I can stretch it. But if I've made a two-part wall already soldered together, it's much harder to resize. So once again, on this corner, I'm using the saw to get a notch where I've made my scribe mark. This chair is down too low for me to be doing this correctly, so I'm awkward. Not that I'm not often awkward, but that's right now what's giving me the grief. Extra bonus awkward. Remember to flip. I also find that I have a hard time not wanting to grab onto the end that I've got sticking up, but you got to be cautious of that because it's been cut part way through. It's really easy to bend it out of the way and snap it. So try not to hold too much pressure on the already bent end. Okay, once again, I'm following my curve and bending and starting the curve on the far side. I'm going to check it, remembering where I started because my dot is there. Opening up your curves if you need to get a little bit more fit. Okay, and then I'm following my next curve and marking my final corner. I always find this one the hardest because I've got stuff in the way, so it's hard to get clean marking of the line, and it's hard to get my saw in there, et cetera, et cetera. When in doubt, err on the side of too small over too large. But you can stretch up. If you have to size it down, you're going to have to cut it open and resolder it.
No, I have a question about big or small.
Big or small stones?
No, as in general, what's the reasoning behind this? They say, or I heard, use your biggest tool to do something like that.
Yep. So I tell you, use the biggest file for the job.
Yeah,
That I've used the most context of that. And that's because Joy Raskin, who's based out of New Hampshire, who's a wonderful teacher, taught me that. Basically, you want to, the larger the tool that you can control,
right.
the more material you will move under the circumstances. It's not 100% of the time rule. For example, when I was doing that setting, I needed
Right.
smaller tools, right?
Right.
But it is in something like the case of when I was filing down the last of the nubs of the sprues on that, I could have spent hours using small hand files, you know, the
Right.
little bitty guys, but I was able to get into the spaces I needed with one of my larger flat files.
Got
So
it.
wouldn't I, right? It takes material down faster, and therefore I'm working less to get it done.
Oh, I see. I see. I just remember that because I was cleaning a major solder spill.
Yeah.
And I wanted to move faster and I couldn't. I had to use the small ones.
So why did you have to use the small ones? What was it?
It was a bezel and
Yeah.
a delicate, so I had to go with a very, very small file.
Yeah. So there are definitely things that influence the right tool.
Right.
Rachel, could I see the height of that bezel compared to the stone? So you went from the cullet to the top of the table. You did more than the,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Question?
well, you go 2/3 or 1/3 above the girdle, but you added a little bit more to be able to saw back.
To file back and
Wow.
or because then I've got something consequential. You know, it's also some of it is design. You know, if I go too tall, it's going to be tippy looking, or it may overbalance a piece. But if I did this just bare minimum, it would, like, it's not a presence. It would only be about to there. And let's see if I can show how it would go. So it would only be about there. And it would be a short little bezel just kind of hanging out. By giving it a little bit more height. Oh no, hang on a sec.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, that's okay. By giving it a little bit more height, I have something that will present well on whatever work I'm doing. Assuming I haven't broken the stone.
So then you took your calipers and you measured from the table to the cullet and
Yep.
added a little bit more.
Added a little bit more for oomph, yeah.
Okay.
And I have not been concentrating enough, so I've got too wide of a line on one side. I didn't make my curve curvy enough. So I'm going to have to correct. I'm going to have to take a loss of a portion of this, but I can save my last curve. So what I ended up doing is I was yapping at you guys instead of paying attention to my curve here, and I'm a little too long. And as I said, your option is to cut and resolder, but I'm not even there yet. So I'm going to start by simply cutting this off here and starting again from that point. So let me try to pay a little more attention today. Corner, actually go the other way, starting from that corner. So it's really, really important that This is the step I didn't do well enough. You match your curve and get your measurement as you're working it. Because if you don't, what I did was I didn't get a sharp enough curve. So when I marked my point, this was wider open, and that meant there was more material than I needed at the corner. And snug.
So then you don't choose to straighten that bezel out and recurve it?
Oh,
You
so
choose
the
this-
problem was that I had already put my file mark in. So-
Okay, yeah.
Line was too long and I'd already folded. So my choices were either have two solder points, one where my seam was going to close up and then cutting and resizing, or chop off the end and give myself new cuts, which is what I'm choosing to do. Yeah, that's the downside of when there's a corner and that you've had to mark in. Is it's cornered. That's the minimum length of your piece. You can stretch it a little bigger if it's too small, but if it's overcut, and that's what does me in on those emerald cuts, is the exact markings for the corners. I'm invariably in too close or out too far. In too close, I can sometimes recover from. Out too far, I can't. If only those 8-sided things only had 2 corners, I'd be all set. Geometry, man. This is the step when I'm filing these. This is in an area where I know I invariably go too fast. I always want to be like, cut the line in. But if I slow down, I get a crisper, cleaner line, and therefore a cleaner fold when I go to bend. Slow and steady on this one. Okay, so once again, I'm using the half round pliers to support it. I'm going to check that I am in fact doing what I think I'm doing on this stone. Nice fit on that corner. Oh, come on, get paper, I need you. Slippery little stone. Need to get a little more bend in there. That curve. Too much bend. Okay, now I got to bend the last side. Well, the last full side, then I'll bend the other side. And again, watching that corner, I can modify it by how I hold my pliers. Too steep of a curve. So if I'm not using curved pliers, I mean the half round pliers, then my other go-to is going to be my flat pliers, because those can take out the curve. Or if I'm really careful, if I only had one, the flat pliers I can use at an angle as something to curve against. So the more precision you have at this step, as evidenced by me not having precision on that last version, the more complete and the faster your project will go, even though it feels like it's going really, really slowly. Where did I start? There we go. With these tiny little modifications to the curve, they make a difference in getting a good fit to your setting. So I've now got a curve that's going to meet me. Want it. Mark my corner. Angle file. Very slow and steady, as I never do. Nice line for that. And then doing my last bend. And this one's the tough one because we're trying to bend into another piece. And we got to sort of make them meet up. Which is my corner starting dot. I started there, I started there. Okay, that one makes me a lot happier. Okay, so now the trick is to finish my curve in a way that I can trim it to meet the other side. And again, in this case, I'd rather cut a little bit long and then trim back. But I'm going to try for as close as I can get on the first pass. Mark it there. That's still. Outline. You can absolutely saw these, and especially if you're working with thicker bezels, you may want to saw through both halves, but with 22 gauge or 24 gauge, whatever I ended up with, I'm going to go with shears for the quickest, cleanest cut that I can get, because I will always cut straighter with shears than I do with a saw. That's just my wobble. And then we're going to close the seam up, see how it fits, and make sure our curve is following. This is still going to be a little big on that side, because I can see the size differential. Off. For a nice clean fit, and checking that it's the angle that I need. So I've got now a little bit snug on one side, but by the time I've soldered it and reshaped it and stretched it, I should be good. So I'm going to head over to the soldering bench for the first time in a while. Got to put fresh flux in. Hang on a second. Got a good view for you guys, or do you need to be closer?
That looks good.
Okay. I'm just using a little paste flux. If my cut hadn't been as clean as it is, then I would be doing some filing and get a tight fit. You always want a nice clean fit for soldering, and I'm using hard solder for this seam. It's another benefit of the of two-parters is that you'll have an outer seam and an inner seam, both hard soldered, that are opposite each other. So when we make the inner component for this bezel, we're going to make sure that we do not put our seams abutting one another. They have to go on opposite sides. The other thing I can do to give a little bit of strength to this, but you don't want to overdo it with the flooding of solder, is I can put solder in the corners to flow down where I have filed. And I'm going to do that while I'm here. A little bit in each corner, and then I'll flow them for my tiniest little specks. So tiny, I dropped it. And I'm just gonna run those down the cuts to give a little bit of stability back where I had taken it away by cutting into it. So the bummer about trilliums is that because they each come with their own special cut and angles, there's not a lot of great mandrels for them. Hang on a sec, I'm gonna show you some of the ones that I really have. A trillium mandrel. Triangle mandrels, but not tons of trilliums. Where is my trillium? Your dog. Huh. Not seeing my one actual trillium mandrel in my stack, so I may have packed it away somewhere. But you can find tons of triangles. The problem is that a lot of our stones are not truly equilateral. So this is only going to get you nominal reshaping if you're way off, but it's a well-cut stone. So I can see that my proportions are decent because my corners come in on the rough spots of where they hit on the mandrel. But all that's showing me is that I did a reasonably good job of equal spacing on my corners, right? It's not actually being useful for me for shaping. Although if I get really badly distorted, I can come back onto a triangle, flatten it out, and then use my half rounds to get my curve points again. So now I'm going to go in and refine the curves that I've got a little bit. And this is where that corner squeeze that I'm talking about. And this is super gentle squeezing. I probably want to check both sides to make sure that I'm doing similar curvature to each corner. And then also I can work the corners, the curves themselves. So what I'm doing here is this torquing action, not twerking, torquing. I'm doing a little bit, rather than using the curve of the plier, I'm pressing it at an angle and twisting in the direction I want to move the material to just get that curve in there. So I can just sort of shape it up. And this eyeballing of these is one of those things that you'll just get better at over time. Like I can see I've got a little bit of a lumpy bumpy on one side, but broadly, I have a pretty darn good fit for the outer ring of the stone. Not perfect, but it's close, and it'll be closer once I put the inner ring in. So we've done our first outer layer, and we have it shaped and well fitted to the stone. You want it completely shaped and ready before you move on to the next step, which is to make the inner step. Questions at that point? Okay. So now I'm going to make another strip. I can go as low as 28 gauge. I tend to do 24, 26 gauge for the inner line. Another nice trick is if you're making gold outer bezels and the interior is not going to show to anyone, use silver interiors to save yourself a little money. So for this one, I'm going to go with something that is a little closer to the height of the stone. And then I'm going to take a little bit below that because by just a tiny smidge, because I don't need to have, I know it's going to rest higher in the piece. So what I'm going to be doing, that's going to leave me about a millimeter of workspace up at the top. In this case, it depends on the size of the stone. That 1 millimeter is not a die-hard thing. It's what's the table, what's the cut of the stone, that sort of thing. But I'm making it shorter than the one that we just built, is the point. And this one, instead of making it to fit the stone, we're going to make it to fit the bezel we just shaped. Once again, clean it up, flatten it a little bit. And again, if my seam is here on the outer one, I want to start my seam for the other one over here somewhere. Because then when I solder the two parts together, I'm less, or solder it to something even worse, once I've got it all finished, I'm less likely to have my seams open up. So in this case, I'm going to start by making my first curve halfway along, because all I'm doing is trying to fit it in there. And then I'm going to make my first corner. And these principles of corners are going to apply when we do similar activities for funky shaped stone. I'm going to pull out the funky stone that I pulled aside for when we get to it, so that you guys can see what I'm talking about of a funky cut. So this stone has curve and angle in, and straight, right? And I may find one that has a concave if I can. I think I still have a couple stones cut like that. But so we're going to be using a combination of what we would do on a square stone and what we would do on a curved stone.
Rachel, can you bring that one up to the camera?
Yeah.
Or the camera down to it? Okay.
Here, let me take it out because it's mucky looking in the case. It's a really pretty stone. Right, so we've got,
Yeah, lovely.
it's a beautiful piece. I found a series of these in citrine and in ametrine and the amethyst.
What happened?
So, are you having trouble seeing us, Sonia?
It's frozen. Yeah.
Anybody else frozen?
No, it's mine.
No,
It's
here.
my connection.
So on
Okay.
this stone it's not quite square. It's a little bit steeper than, it's a little bit narrower, you know, it's probably like 88 degrees instead of 90-degree corner here. It has slightly wider, probably a 91 or 92 degree corner here. And then it has a curve that is not a consistent curve. It's shallower going to a steeper curve. So we're going to be using both our squaring square stones or cornered stones and our curved stones techniques. And on this one, when I do it, I will probably start my bezel.
It's a free form.
Pardon?
They call it free form.
Freeform, yeah. So I'll probably start my bezel here, work the corners, make my curve, which I want the widest piece of, and then do the corners and meet back again here. That's probably how I would choose to do this. Or I could choose one end or the other, but I think getting my corners at the edges of the material is going to be easier than not. So each stone's a little different, but I want, one of the reasons I wanted to hold off on this, even as much as I love doing the unusual shapes, is I want to practice some of these curved ones with you guys again before we go back to funky shapes. So we've got this, we've got to mark out. I've got to do my triangle file action. Oops, I didn't do my sawing action first. It is amazing how much a position of being seated too low can make it hard to saw. Slow and steady. And this inner one, no matter which shape you're doing, the inner one is designed to be as snug a fit as we can make it. We should be aiming for so snug we're not actually sure we can get it into the inner piece, right? Because we want it as if the walls were literally abutting one another. By the time we're done, they will be. So I'm aiming for snug fit, but I again want to err, oops, on the right side. I want to err on the side of too small, and then I will stretch it big enough to create problems. So I still need to make sure my curves follow, or else they'll be too big or too small. And I'm starting on that half of the opposite side of from the half wall that I did before. So it needs a little more curve. And then this is a little trickier to mark, because what we're marking is where do we hit the inside of the piece. So again, err on the side of a smidge too small, which is meaning it's going to be loose inside of this, because we can always use our stretching techniques to stretch the inner one. If it's too big, we're not gonna be able to squeeze it inside. We're not gonna be able to put it into the inner bearing. Questions, Sonia?
I'm looking, oh, sorry, I'm looking to see if I have a trillion, but I can't find it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I stash trillions. I buy way more trillions than I should, because I don't use them as fast as I buy them. But I think that's probably true about all the stones. I don't know what it is, but there's just something really aesthetically pleasing to me. I way prefer them to rounds and ovals. And a marquee has its place, but it's got such specific, I don't know, not connotations. It's got such specific use in like the wedding industry and so on, that I don't find myself drawn to use them in other designs unless they're really big. I'll happily set a giant trillion. I mean a giant marquee, but the little marquees don't do much for me. Personal taste, that's all.
I don't think I've ever set a trillion. That's why I'm.
Oh yeah, good. Well, that's what we'll get going here. Okay. So what I'm seeing now, what I'm aiming for with my each angle is to make sure that when I try to stuff it down in there, I'm going to be able to stuff it in there, but it's going to be a hard fit, right? Again, I'd rather it be loose inside the setting than not. And always check that you're on the same starting point that you intend to be. Got my next curve, and I'm checking and marking the inner corner. And then we'll behave. There we go. I think it's that from a design perspective, I find odd numbers more interesting than even numbers in my own designs. Okay. The triangle. Slow and steady. Which, by the way, I say out loud for my sake, not yours. It's a reminder every time.
Now, have you seen those kite shapes?
Yeah, kite is kind of interesting. The problem is they're extra pointy. So those sharp, steep corners are really, really fragile. You have to very much protect a kite. I like the kites more when they're a flat, low cut faceted stone, like not a coulette, but whatever it's called when you have, it almost looks like there's a table on both sides.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
They appeal to me a little bit more than, oops, there we go, that's what I want to be. Than the deeply faceted, I mean the deeply couletted cuts of kite. But I worry about those the sharp corners. I worry about those.
Yeah,
hitting
this,
him.
they have a very sharp corners. So what's the best way to set them?
Oh, I don't know. Let me think about what I would recommend. I haven't set any because I'm so concerned about the fragile ones, but I think I would consider, so sort of like the one that I showed you where I had trimmed back. So that's an equivalent point to what you might have on a kite.
Yeah.
I might do a partial bezel like that. That's
Uh-huh.
capturing the ends. Or I might do a very heavy prong at each end and drill it out where the corner hits, but that would be a nerve-wracking setting job.
Yeah, no, I kind of like the first example that the first that was in your class.
Yes, that's the bezel setting
Yeah.
class.
How do you call that?
The name of the class, Bezels Less Ordinary.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the weekend of September 27th, whatever the weekend is towards the end of September.
Are you gonna have different examples? That's the one I took already.
Oh, yeah. So no, it's going to be covering the same basics that you've already taken. Well, that I need to mark it. I mean, you're welcome to take any of my classes more than once, anybody is. And then I'll try to give you more challenging projects in it. But it's not always of interest. Like the clasps class, I always try to rotate at least one of the fancy clasps.
No,
So
that's the one I'm taking in November,
yes, that is the November class.
but I forgot the dates. Do you remember off the top of your head?
If you remind me at end of session, I'll pull them up.
Oh, okay.
It's also up on my website if you want to peek. I think it's either the first weekend in November or the middle weekend in November. Can't remember whether it was a week or two away from Thanksgiving. So once again, I'm checking to see if I can get a nice snug fit. And I have too much material still. That's good because I can cut down at this stage. What was that?
No, I didn't say. I'm just mumbling. Let me put the microphone off.
So I'm still at this point, I'm just trimming a little tiny smidge at a time until it's small enough to squeeze into the outer frame. And this is about where I want to be. I want to be having a hard time, but know that once I get it soldered, I would be able to. So what I'm seeing is I've got a little bit of gap in my curve. It's not a perfect match. And I know that once I get that curve to match perfectly, this will pop into play. If I was worried about it, I would trim a smidge more off of this just to get a snugger, to get a closer fit on it, but I'm pretty confident. And now I'm going to go back over and solder. Once again, hard solder. A little bit of flux. And I'm going to pull out a little bit more of my chip solder for those corners that I want, because that's actually both just the perfect amount with a little tiny piece of chip solder. I'm using a little bit bigger chunk for the actual seams, like those corners, the little balls that I was picking up were my spare bits of the chip solder. And there's the seam. Corners. Corners, did you get all- push it out a little bit. And the corner keeps sticking out. In this case, it's okay because it's all going to be hidden inside. Okay. Second part done. Now, we got to go back over and do a very careful reshaping and stretching of this one, so that it truly matches the corners. And this is where that trick of using the half round on the corners really is going to make a difference for me, because the area that it wasn't meeting well was especially in the corners. It's the hardest part to get. And I want to make sure that I'm lining up with the shape so I don't have my seams lined up to one another. So I'm in pretty good shape there. I'll know I'm in great shape when I'm snug enough on the fit that I need to hammer it into place. Now, normally I'd go and pickle all these and everything, but I'm trying to get us through this, and it doesn't hurt at this point to have it a little blackened. It's not getting in the way. If it were really fire scaly or anything, I would clean it off and get it all set up for soldering right out of the gate. But for now, I want upside down partially. It's probably a problem. Now I'm looking to just get a tight fit. And when I think I'm going to be able to fit it in there, before I do, I'm going to file down the outer upper rim. So I'm taking an angle to this outer ring. I'm also seeing I'm not very flat. So before I do that, I'm going to make sure my surfaces are level, or else I won't have a clean seat for the stone. First. Yeah, little solder blob at the top getting in the way. Go, that's nice. Not too worried about the bottom side. I'm only focusing on this top lip for now. And taking down at a bevel edge, the outside edge. Reminder that this is in order to give a little gap that our solder can flow into between the two walls without creating a bumpiness up at the top that gets in the way of the stone resting flat on it. I can draw what I mean by that if that needs more clarity. We've also talked about it in a few other sessions. And in the corners in particular, I'm taking down the corners where it gets the most trouble getting the solder to flow into those corners. So I'm just putting that tiny little bevel on there, and then finding my outside one that I've set aside, making sure I'm not seams together, but instead seams where I designed them to be on opposite sides. And now I've got it lined up, and this should be in a place where I need to actually pull out a mallet and tap it in. That's how snug I want my fit between the two. And this is not even as snug as I would like it. Let me see if I can zoom in enough for you guys to see the gapping that I've got a tiny bit of gapping in my corners that's making me unhappy.
Wait. Uh, yeah, I can see it.
There's a
Yeah,
tiny bit right there. This corner's looking pretty good. This
Mhm.
corner needs a little work, but it's not as bad as this top corner. Right? So now my goal is to use my pliers to stretch into those corners. And this is going to be a combination of the flat pliers and
Yeah.
the half round pliers to really make those corners sharp and sort of stretch the material. It's okay if it distorts out of shape a little bit because we're going to put it back once we've got them soldered together, but that just squeezes my material out into the corners a little better than it was. Right? And if I really need to, I may go back into those corners with the half round to encourage them into place. What I shouldn't be able to do is push this out easily, and I can. So I'm going to do my stretching exercise. I can push it out a little more readily than I want. So to stretch this bigger, I'm going to start with the half rounds and just squeeze really hard in a couple spots on each side.
But
Well, this-
isn't that gonna make it too big for your stone?
I'm trying to make it so it's not too big for my stone. That's why I did the outer one first. The outer one guides me to say that's what's going to fit my stone. So I'm only stretching my inner bezel,
Okay,
the outer stone bezel, the outer wall. Right? So I have to do this in small amounts because I don't want to make it oversized or else I have to go cut it open again and resolder it. So I'm doing a 2 squeeze for each side from both the top and the bottom of it. And then I'm going to see how it fits now. I'm hoping that was enough to snug it a little bigger. There's my seam. There's my seam. And making sure I've got the right side down with the beveled edge. It's a little harder to get in, but it may not yet be quite sized big enough. Let's see. Still a little gappy at the end and push it out easily. Yeah, it's still a little too easy, so I'm going to go do a couple more squeezes, especially from the top side, because that's a little gappier than the bottom. Nope, I keep moving out of frame. Sorry, guys. Let me back up a little bit. So this is just super squeeze. If you're really undersized, you can move to using a pair of round pliers instead. But if you do that, you're going to get sort of marked up around it. The half rounds, if you can use those, don't do as bad a job of leaving little obvious marks there that are hard to file out or sand out. So I'm just doing a gentler squeeze on the side that's fitting more snugly. Line up my marks. How does that get smaller? That doesn't work. It managed to get smaller. I don't know why that happens. May have to suffer the slings of marks from a double round, from the round pliers. We'll see. And I'm also going to check that it's not because I'm sort of flattening parts of it. So I got to put my curves back in. Looks like I could probably use a little bit more curviness to these. Biting me a little bit, which is a good sign. That's getting a lot better. I'm just going to do one more pass with the half rounds to try and get my corners all out as far as I can. Okay, so let me zoom in again so you can see the tighter fit. And you guys could do a drinking game based on me zooming the wrong direction every bloody time.
We already are.
Okay, so it's a lot closer fit. There's a little tiny smidge of a gap there, but it's enough that I think the solder will do the trick. And
Yeah.
then inside, we're in good shape too. And we're going to put a fair amount of solder on this. So I say that, and then it falls out on me. Yeah, I'm going to do one more big stretch. Where are my pliers? Pull out the big guns. And this is the part that when I'm in the studio with people, I can really, really push them to make it super snug. You guys are going to have to pretend I'm sitting there judging you when you do your own settings, staring at you and contemplating whether you've actually made it as snug as you could. All right, I'm calling that one ready to solder. Okay, so on the soldering on these, I like to do it from the back side because we can then see the flow that we're going to get. Flux will get where it belongs. And if, by the way, you're soldering from this angle and it starts to slide down into the inner one slides down into the outer one, you know that you have not, in fact, made your bezels fit tightly enough. And if you want to, you can use, if you feel you have the control, you can use hard solder for this. But if not, use your medium. That's what I'm going for. And be generous. On a trillion, I tend to want to put a blob of it in each corner. I'm going to see if I'm going to have success with this being as grubby as it is. Because what we're trying to do is get enough solder in to flow between the two walls all the way down to the place that we filed, to the beveled edge we filed. So you're trying to get it to flow into the cracks enough that you see a full solder seam. I got some on all sides, but this one, go, that's a little better. A little bit more fill. Too big of a piece in this corner. And you'll think you got it all nice and filled up, and then you'll do some more heating somewhere else and solder will flow away from another part. Your real goal is to have good coverage in here, because when we file this back down, we want it to appear seamless from the bottom side. And then I'm going to check to make sure that I actually got solder flow all the way up to the top, which I did. I'm seeing nice flow in there. And it should be just like a glistening line of solder, just like you would get when you were soldering a bezel down to the wall. So that is my approach to getting that there. And I'm going to clean this up in the pickle and then do the touch-up shaping to get the stone to fit again. And I'll sand the bottom and so on. Are there questions about any of those steps that we took? And how they differ or are similar to other step bezels we've done? Okay. This should be old hat for us by now, because we went through it a year ago. So you got it right back then, right? This is just refresher for all of us. But seriously, if you want more of the step bezel methodology, I would go back and look at the chunk that, remember, I put the descriptives of on each YouTube video, so you can go back and pretty easily figure out which ones we're doing the basic round step bezel and the variations on it that we did. I think, go ahead.
But they are all step bezels. What changes is the shapes.
What changes is the shapes and the approach to doing those shapes. There's different things to get them shaped. The hardest, and one of the ones that we're going back to do, is the emerald cut. And then I think I've still been looking for a decent triangular shape stone. I think I know, when I was talking about it, I had found a little onyx. So triangle as opposed to trillion is a little more challenging, frankly, than a trillion. A triangle is more challenging than a trillion because it needs more precision in the corners and is a riskier stone. It's more likely to break when you're setting it. So I think I have triangle stone to redo on the step bezel side of things to get a good.
I'm up all for it because it's a nice way to work with gold and not to make it look more, hefty, although it's not, because you have silver inside.
Yep. Yeah, and I think is it Alex Boyd or his uncle Michael Boyd that teaches the bezels where you set the gold along?
Alex.
It's Alex, yeah. Which I think is really elegant. I love, he gets good texture on it, and then he blackens it. Gold. I love that look.
Yeah, it's a nice look, but he always blackens it.
Yeah.
That's his trademark or whatever, if you can say.
Yep, it pulls out nicely, so I like it. Any questions about our step bezel experience while that is pickling, or about any others? I don't think we're gonna be doing another one tonight. Or
I just wanted to know if you got my emails. I think I sent you like 5 emails or 4.
No, I don't. Unless you sent, did you send them while we were meeting or some other time?
No, some other time in between. I don't know.
Nope, then I did not get them. If I didn't answer them, and I don't know what you're talking about having sent them to me.
Oh, okay.
So
no,
please resend.
I was just, well, as I was making the bail of the piece.
Yep.
I was just sending you the emails, but in the end, I just follow what you told me.
Good.
The keyword was slot, SLOT, and I did it. See?
Good. All right, hang on. I gotta pop you onto Spotlight for Everyone. Oh, beautiful. Oh, that's got such great lines.
See? But the thing was doing the soldering. I mean, I was gonna ask you to see if you could perfect it, but you know what I'm talking about? Like here.
So getting the solder where you were slotting the piece, that's
yeah, like there.
Yeah, fantastic. You didn't need me at all, clearly.
Well, the keyword was slot. You told me that day. So then I went to work and that's it. So I sent you pictures of this. Maybe I should resend them.
Please resend them. If they were very large, maybe my email refused them. So if it just send one image per email and it maybe will get through to me, because I would love to have shots of that to show John. That's an amazing use of the slotted card setting.
Oh, okay. All right.
Like, I would love to see the earring version of that design. I would like, there's so much you could do with that.
Oh, yes. I'm working on that. I just have to, I'm not good at considering weight.
Yeah.
So I had put a thicker chain, way thicker than this, but it's too heavy, and I think it looks better like this with
I
this.
like that. It's got movement. It's got sort of a mid-century modern feel, but also really modern. Like I have those lines are really elegant. That's like that's one of the more intriguing uses of card setting I've ever seen. So
Good.
nice.
He's gonna be happy.
Yeah. Anybody else have something they want to show off?
Okay, now okay, good.
Wendy, is that you getting up to show me something, I hope?
Yeah, Wendy should have something.
Well, it took me 4 hours and 4 months to find this card setting. Oh, please don't spotlight me.
Happy to see the work.
A second here. There we go. And this is something that I did in 2011, 12, but I found it. And so now Sonia has inspired me to do something with it. Yay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yes.
Huh?
Yes.
So Betsy, you remember Melinda Alexander? That was a class with her, but that was a long time ago.
So the focus is a little off. Can you tell me, did you do the cut down and fold over method? You did. There we go. That's what I want to see, is the prong that you pulled over.
Yeah.
That's clean. I like it.
Wow, that's really nice. You did a good job. That was so difficult for me. I did
A
another one.
long time ago.
Nice. Anybody else? No? Okay, let me just check the pickle and then we'll test to see if this is actually still fitting. And then I will send you on your merry way for another month. Little bit of excess solder around the edges, but not too terrible. Let me spotlight again. And if I didn't lose my stone, I suspect I'm gonna have to do a little bit of reshaping yet because I torqued the outer edge of it a bit. And I definitely have to clean up the top edge because I have excess material. Yeah, there's a little bit in the corners that I could go fill in if I wanted to. There's a little bit of gapping right there, but it doesn't gap all the way down. Oh, darn, it does gap all the way down. I'm gonna have to fix that. So I'm gonna need to add some extra solder and try to get my corners a little more cornered at the back in order to get clean. Yeah, I gotta put a little more filler solder in there. Solder sometimes fills the gaps. But broadly, that's gonna be our setting in there. Okay, so I'll clean this up for next time. I'll get a little more solder fill. And then we will have that to set in our next round. And we will, what did I say I was going to do in the next session? I had notes. Well, we'll probably do the trillion basket. And then I think probably I will do an unusual cut. You can tell, guys, I'm totally avoiding the emerald cut, and I shouldn't. I should just do the emerald, get it out of the way, and then we'll do one of the fancy cuts to do a big finale. I got to look at the list of other things. So I'm not sure what I'll do besides the basket version of the trillion. If you want to play along at home, I would encourage you to get a larger trillion stone, larger faceted trillion stone of some sort.
I found them.
Good. And the thing to think about when you're deciding what your basket is going to look like is, do you need for design reasons, or do you want for aesthetic reasons your corners protected, or can you do a double? I'm going to draw this one because my fingers are not going to be at an angle that's showing you what I'm talking about. Where's my whiteboard? It fell. Are you going to make one that, when you look at it from the top, has prongs like this, which is good for protecting the, oh my goodness, drink. Protecting the corners of the stones, so it's better for a ring or something like that. Or do you want something that's more aesthetically, potentially aesthetically interesting, where you're doing two coming in, right? Doesn't protect the corner as well, but you may be able to get some of that protection if you make a thicker prong, so that if we were to sort of slice it, the corner would be here and the prong would come in enough that the corner isn't really butting out beyond the prong. So the prong creates a protection simply by being further out along the stone. You can technically, you can set a trillion by putting your prongs this way, but that completely leaves your corners unprotected. So do it at your own risk. I'm on the big stones, I tend to like this double prong method. So on this big citrine here, I'm likely to do something like that.
And, oh, double.
Yep. I really like that look because I kind of like the point of the corners is to be cornery. So I like them to show off a little bit. So I would probably end up putting one here and here and here and here and here and here on this stone. I don't know if that's showing to you guys or not, maybe not so much on my hands. But you can consider that for your own stones. The smaller they are, the less likely I am to do the doubling because it's a pain in the butt on a really tiny stone to get yourself just enough prong on either side. But so we'll probably work on that. That'll be our next one because that was one I was hoping to try and do today, but time-wise that.
What size is that green, the one you have, the citrine?
Oh, let's see. Where's my calipers? I need millimeters. It is roughly 16.5 from point to side center,
That's big.
or 17 across from corner to corner. Yeah, it's a good sized stone. I have lucked out to get some really nice big citrines in my years of shopping. So that'll be the plan, and I was going to give you a reminder, send me notes for John and pictures if you've got them. I'd happily see pictures of those things that you guys showed today. Our next session is Wednesday, August 16th. And keep in mind that we're sort of feeling out what we might want to do for post Cogswell if you still want to hang out on a once-a-month basis with me for video and project-based and design-based ramblings.
Yeah, cocktails.
Yes, you can always bring cocktails. That's the delight of having you be in your own studio. I am not responsible for your drinking.
Well, you said earlier, you called us your fans earlier, and I think we should be Rachel's groupies.
Yeah.
I am not a big groupie kind of gal. That was an absolute joke of that embarrasses the hell out of me when something like that goes on. But at the same time, I totally get it because I do that to John. I'm taking a class from John Cogswell. Oh my goodness. It took me like 5 classes to get over that feeling. But John is a hard guy to fangirl over, in person.
Did any of you ever take a class with Harold O'Connor?
No, I would love to. I've heard great things. You would have asked when the bezels class was. It is September 29th through October 1st are the dates of the bezels less ordinary class. The clasps class is 11/17 to 11/19.
Okay,
And the
that's
coliforms in person is March 15th through 17th of next year. I had on my vacation to-do list that I was going to figure out my schedule of classes for next year. It didn't happen, so I got to sit down and do that. But before I do that, I've got to get through Park City and survive. So
What a slacker.
I know. So the tough part is that my day job folks, while I was on vacation, scheduled the possibility of me needing to be in Florida the day after the Park City show ends. And so I'm trying to figure out that then they change their minds again. So I don't know the answer about whether I'm going to have to travel and zip and go back and forth. And yeah, I got to get rid of my gear and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. But that is an adventure for a couple weeks from now when I've had more sleep.
Well, thank you for this. This is great.
Hopefully, go ahead.
I think Betsy was just saying thank you. What were you going to say, Sonia?
Oh, no, I was gonna say, keep in mind that if you're gonna offer a class in person, I hope it's at the time that I can go and look for go do the rock hounding.
Oh, nice. So I'm not teaching any in person in Portland yet scheduled. I only did one Portland local class. I suspect they'll ask if I want to do another one next year, but I'll have to figure out what I want to cover before we get to that. So yeah. All right, gang. Have a lovely evening. I hope your weather improves if it is not good weather where you are. And I will see you in a month for our next round of fill in the blanks.
Thank you,
Thank
Rachel.
you, Rachel.
Bye all.
Ladies.